So let's continue our discussion on Mintzberg by looking at the challenges that managers face. So one challenge that managers face is that confidence in competence. So think about it, right? You're told, fake it till you make it. So when you're new in a job, especially if you're in a leadership or management position where people are following you and listening to you, right? You feel uncertain. In fact, one of my colleagues said when he started his job, like the first day of work, they asked him to stand up and give a presentation in front of all the people in his department. Well, how does that feel if it's you're new and you're expected to tell people who've been there a while what's going on, right? So we fake it till we make it. We pretend confidence. So as a manager, we have to fake it. We have to pretend confidence. We need to have that appearance of authority that we know what we're doing. So we need others to believe, to have confidence in what we're saying. So on one extreme, you may not really feel it, but you have to portray it. The other risk, though, on the other end is that if you are seen as overconfident, then you can be perceived as arrogant, right? Have you ever been in a meeting or a class when there's a person there who comments on everything, never shuts up, right? So we don't want to go too far to be seen as arrogant, but we do need to be seen as confident, even if we don't feel it, right? That's that kind of imposter syndrome. We feel like we're not good enough. Well, in the role of manager, you need the appearance, even if you're not feeling it. We also need to act decisively in a complicated, nuanced world. The challenge with being a manager is that decisions are hectic. There's lots of components and complications, but as a manager, you don't have a lot of time. And you have to be quick on your feet in terms of making decisions. You don't have the ability to sit on something for months on end and think about it. You have to make decisions quickly, even though there can be quite complex. And there's repercussions to the decisions you make, right? There's fallout. It could mean people's jobs. It could mean the success of the organization. So you have to act decisively, even though decisions can be complicated and nuanced. The manager also needs to balance the need for change and the need for continuity. So when you're leading people, there is a need for continuity, right? If we're going to have unity of direction, then we need to be consistent in which way we're going. We set the strategic goals, we have long and short-term goals, and we keep working towards them. If you've ever been on a team or an organization that one day you report to one person, the next day you report to someone else. This week, this year, we're focusing on these areas, then these areas. Oh, we just got some funding, or someone new came in, has this new idea. We're trying to be everything to everybody. So we need continuity. On the other end, we need to be able to be responsive, flexible as an organization. We need to be able to adapt and change. And so you need to be able to have change, but at the same time, the role of the manager is to reduce the risk, create more stability. And so that's partly by creating that continuity. Clear direction, consistent direction. The other thing we hear from Mintzberg in terms of challenges for managers is because the job is open-ended, so if you've seen the job description for many management roles, it can be kind of vague, right? So what you might be asked to do is all kinds of things. So because that's not a very refined job description and role, a manager is inclined to take on a heavy workload. So we actually have a researcher in management. Her name is Rosemary Stewart, and she really focused on that work of a manager and what she calls fragmentation of the job. So the job by definition is fragmented. There are lots of demands on you as a manager. Demands from your manager, from your boss, demands from your staff, demands from your customers, external demands in terms of changes to government regulations, environmental controls, what's happening with competition. So all of these demands on you and all of these constraints on you. You are limited by law, by contracts. You are limited by the equipment you have, by the people you have, their expertise, the amount of people you have. You're limited by laws. I've already said that one. So you're greatly constrained in terms of how you make decisions, right? And you have to make a lot of decisions. So the job by definition is very fragmented. You spend a lot of time jumping from one thing to the next. And according to Rosemary Stewart, managers also have a tendency to make it even more fragmented. And she says this is the lazy approach to being a manager. So let's think about it. You are a manager. Your job is fragmented. Your day is jumping from one meeting to the next, to the next, to the next. No time to think. No time to do the rest of the work that's on your to-do list because you're constantly in meetings. But fragmentation, just going to meetings all day, is a lazy approach. Why? Because how hard is it to just sit through a bunch of meetings? According to Rosemary Stewart, it is easier to be a grasshopper jumping from one task to another than to be a beaver chewing away at a task. So, is the job fragmented because you're making it fragmented? Are you busy on the right things? Should you be in every one of those meetings? Are you doing somebody else's job? Maybe you've done some group work in school. Have you ever had someone on the team who wasn't pulling their weight, right? You just take over, you do their work. Well, they're more than happy to let you do their work. And it creates more work for you. Maybe you're the control freak that that needs to do everyone else's work. But recognize that means that's time you're not spent doing yours, and it creates more fragmentation for your job. So people are more than happy to let you do their work for them. So are you busy on the right things? Some other key challenges for managers, according to Mintzberg, is bringing order to the work. The nature of the manager's job is in itself disorderly, right? That fragmentation, constantly running to put out fires, lots of demand and constraints on you can create chaos. The job of the manager is to reduce the uncertainty, to reduce the risk by bringing order to that chaos. Managers also have to see the big picture among the details, right? We talked before in terms of not getting bogged down in the details as the manager. So the manager needs to know the details, because what they're going to likely be doing is they're going to have a big problem that they're going to break into little chunks and then assign or delegate those pieces of work. So they need enough knowledge of the project in order to do that role. And they need to be able to pull all that work back together in the end. So they're going to break tasks into achievable chunks. They need to see the big picture so they can put it back together again. But again, they also can't be bogged down in the details, and they need to be able to trust and have faith in their employees to manage those detailed processes, because they're just going to have too much on their plate in order to manage and keep track of all the little pieces. So the manager is going to break the task into chunks and then put it all back together at the end. That takes special skill. Maybe you have been on a team, maybe you've written a report as a group, right? You divide it up and each person writes a section and then you read it at the end. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because everyone's coming at it from different directions. The pieces don't tie together. The role of the manager is to put the pieces back together, to tie back to that big picture. So if we're breaking things into chunks, then we need to delegate. The challenge with delegating, with having other people handle those pieces of the project, is what happens when the manager is the one who has the knowledge. The manager is the one who has sat in the meetings with upper management to discuss strategy, has sat in meetings with the external stakeholders to know the constraints. It can become a challenge to delegate to others when the manager has all of the knowledge. So how can you hand off projects to others and share that information? The manager's role is intrinsically disconnected, right? As a manager sitting in those meetings, you are not involved in the day-to-day operations, so that creates that disconnect. You don't have the time to be involved in all those details. So this can create a challenge because the manager's role is to connect, to find that big picture and put it all together, but the role itself is quite disconnected, right? You are not the upper management making strategic decisions. You're not the worker who knows those little details. We also find with middle management, you can live in your silo, in your discipline. Maybe you're just sales, maybe you're just finance. And so you don't have all that bigger picture. So how do you connect when the job itself is a disconnected one? It's also complicated if your role is arbitrarily designated. So we talked before in terms of you might be a manager of a particular area, like in human resources, you might be a sales manager. In smaller organizations where there's not as many managers, you may be the manager of multiple different functional areas within the organization, and that may be people who don't interact with each other on a daily basis. So how do you create that cohesion? How do you get people to work together when they are in unrelated groups working on unrelated projects? And the last challenge we want to look at is the importance of data. And so as you take other courses in our program, this one will come up many times. If you're going to make recommendations to make your company more efficient, more effective, you need good information to base those recommendations and decisions on. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we need a way to measure our performance. We need a way to get information that we can trust so that we can make those recommendations. So if you think about it as a manager, you're asking your employees to collect information for you on customer satisfaction, on how well production is working, how well the equipment is running. If it's not quality data, if you can't trust the information, then how can you trust the recommendations that come out of it?